Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz. This is a 5-day tournament being held with many American players: Hikaru, Nakamura, Fabiano, Caruana, Wesley, Jeffery, Xiong, Shankland, and so on, as well as some players from overseas. 3 days, of Rapid Chess, then 2 days of Blitz. This is day number 2 of Rapid Chess. And the person on the thumbnail today is Shankland. And that's because, well, you'll find out. Okay, first game of the day, d4, knight f6, c4, e6, Nimso Indian defense with bishop to b4, and Sam opts to play queen c2, which is one of the overwhelming main lines. Now, the whole point of queen c2 is to meet an eventual bishop c3 with queen takes c3. That is exactly what white wants, to get the bishop pair without actually taking any structural damage. What black normally does is attack the center with moves like c5, and after pawn takes c5, actually just drop this back. So say, you know what? Well, now you're kind of goofy over here for putting the queen on c2. Stupid. You don't actually say that to your opponent unless you want to get in some trouble with the arbiter. But basically, you waste a little bit of time, but this queen is kind of offside. Now, how does white justify wasting a full tempo on queen c2? Well, white develops. That's not complicated. d5. So Fabiano is trying to strike in the center before white can get settled. Like, for example, if after the move d5 you just play kind of lazily, like e3, bishop e, want to play bishop e2 in castle, you can take, this is a little bit soft, you can play knight d7, knight b6. You basically have no more problems because white spent all this time not really doing too much. So bishop g5. Bishop g5 is a very aggressive move. And now and only now do you play e3 because you force your opponent to move the bishop again to block the pin because it's very annoying. You get the bishop out of danger, knight c6, and rook d1. Here there might very well be moves like long castle, but rook to d1 pins the pawn to the queen. You want to play bishop f6 and pawn takes d5. So Fabiano plays queen a5. The point of queen a5 is to meet this with pressure on the knight. So we have bishop d3, bishop d7, and finally, a few moves later, we finally get pawn takes d5. Shankland tries to liquidate the pressure by taking and taking. And now, Sam has a very comfortable position upon offering this trade of queens. It very well could be the case here that Fabiano should take on d2 and get this position. But this position kind of sucks for black in the sense that you have completely what white has, just worse versions. Like, you have the same 4 pieces, but you have an isolated pawn. The square in front of it is just going to be controlled, and white will double, triple, and just go win the pawn. So, for that reason, Fabiano goes back, and for the remainder of this game, there's a lot of jostling, and there's a lot of shuffling. Like, you see Shankland is keeping something on d4, and if this ever gets taken, he'll take with the queen and the rook and put more pressure on the pawn. But Fabiano's not taking on e4. I was d4. Fabiano's actually not taking anything. Not too much is happening. I mean, I'm kind of just clicking the next button. Again, Shankland is offering a trade of queens to try to remove defenders of this pawn. And Fabiano's like, I don't want that. And now, finally, we have a trade. Why? Why would Shankland move the isolated pawn to c4? Well, he correctly evaluates that actually going like this will land him in an interesting position, getting a knight versus bishop situation and a more fluid structure. By removing the pawn from the center of the board, he now has the open file, he has the open diagonal, he has e4 to block out this bishop, and he's got a pretty promising position. So actually, this aesthetically is very, very decent for Sam. So he's just calmly outplaying Fabiano. He transitions an advantageous position into a more advantageous position, almost like a jiu-jitsu practitioner, right? Steps over, goes for the full mount, knight d4, bishop d7, and now f4 and e5. Now he again transforms the light squared pawn blockade against the bishop into a dark squared wedge in the center that kind of disconnects the circulation of black's position. Very nice play, honestly. Rook e8, and now rook f3. And what do we do with that wedge in the center of the board? Well, we create an attack. Because again, we're creating an attack on the opposite color complex of the bishop that black has. The bishop can't participate in the defense. So every important piece, these 5 in the center, are all on dark squares. This bishop is completely obsolete. Bishop c8, e6. Look at this. Look at this. Sam Shankland, baby, show up. Now, f6 is the only move that doesn't lose, because if you take on e6, I'm going to take. And, you can't take your own pieces. Welcome to GothamChess Recaps. But you can play moves like this. I mean, now you have an unbreakable wedge of pawns. Those two pawns made it the entire board together. Okay? So that's iconic. Bishop b7, rook g4, and now fg6. Now, to Fabiano's credit, he proves why he's Fabiano Caruana, creating like absolute chaos here with g5. So he forces Sam to split the pawns. You never want to split the friends apart. Then he gives a check. And actually, he's making some good counterplay here. Queen e5, pinning the rook to the king. h4 is on the way. That forces Sam to play the move h4 himself. And now, bishop to e4. And the point of bishop to e4, I can only imagine, was two things. Number one, he wanted to threaten this pawn because it can't be taken, obviously. But number two, he wanted to play bishop d3. So for example, if this, then bishop d3, and now white circulation is cut. The bishop gets in the way of literally everybody. Queen and rook, rook and knight, and queen and knight. So the problem is that Fabiano missed that here, Sam can rotate the queen out of the pin and use the threatened pin as a pin onto his opponent. He pinned the pin, and yeah. The other problem with queen e3, that queen has a one-way destination to beat the crap out of that king. Queen here and here. All right, that queen came home from vacation early to slap the king on g8. f5, queen h6, and it's bad news. Sam picks up the h5 pawn. He picks up the f5 pawn. He's now 3 pawns up. But more importantly, he's about to go deliver checkmate. He also gets a bishop for his troubles. And Fabiano Caruana resigns. Sam Shankland, welcome to the big leagues. I mean, this is a man who was half out of 3 yesterday, lost 2 games, made a draw, and here he is beating Fabiano Caruana. I mean, that says a lot. Second game of the day I'd like to show you is the game between Peter Svidler and Quang Liem from Vietnam. This is a very long game. So buckle up, but the climb of the roller coaster is going to be kind of slow. Just a regular king's pawn thing going on here. Honestly, nothing special. Bishop e3 and the first transformation. So no dark, excuse me, no dark squared bishop. The d4 square is occupied by white. The f file is open. I like how this looks aesthetically for white, but black is obviously completely okay. Knight c3, d6. And at some point, black wanted to play bishop e6. That is no longer possible because of this move. So, Quang Liem does the next best thing, which is pin the knight to the queen. That looks very nice. Queen d2. I don't want you to pin me. Bishop h5. That is a weird move. You would think that knight h4 is very playable here to try to get into these squares. The problem is this is hidden. And so knight e4 here sacks the knight, and you get the knight back right away. So you can't play knight h4. So you have to go queen f2. And you might ask yourself, why on earth is Peter Svidler allowing himself to be bullied by horses? Well, bishop b3, and the thing about knights is that oftentimes if they stumble forward and can take nothing, they will be booted and escorted out, right? So king h8, and exactly that happens. d5, and just knight takes. Just knight takes. And all that forward momentum that Liem came through with leads to nothing. Just straight up leads to nothing. Now it is white who is just a pawn up. f7 is very soft, and g4 is a big threat. G4 is just lurking in the position. So queen e7 attacks the knight. You got to go queen g3. Obviously, if you play g4, you just lose your knight. So queen g3, rook e8, and here Svidler plays rook f5. This is the only move that protects the knight and continues to apply pressure. Rook f1, and basically the game is just over. You'll play queen h4, you'll take on f6, you'll take here, you'll mate him. So Liem has to do something. So he plays king h7, and now rook f1, and bishop g6. And here's the problem. That really is the problem. If you take on g6, which is what happens in the game, after fg6, the king supports the pawn, which used to not have any support. Now the rook has to go. The rook does. Did you see that? Don't lie. Did you see that the rook could go take the a5 pawn? It's just hidden in all this. But now knight takes e4. There's actually an even more savage computer move here, c6. c6 controls the d5 square, so the knight can't jump in. And there are random situations where this rook is just trapped. Like, the rook has nowhere to go. c6 completely traps the rook's escape. And like, for example, if something like king h1... king h1's a very bad move because knight h5. I'm trying to just waste the move here. It's kind of hard to do that. Queen e1. This rook just has nowhere to go. b6. The rook is trapped. So c6 would have been savage. Instead, we get an explosion. Knight e4, rook f1, king f1, queen e4, and rook c5. And as the dust is settling, what you have to understand is, even though counterplay is being created by black, black cannot trade too many pieces because black is just down material. Knight a6, rook c4, queen goes back to e7. And now we have an endgame. I told you that we were in for the long haul, right? So where is white's advantage? 3 on 2, and the bishop versus the knight. This knight is poopy right now on a6. But black is getting counterplay, and he ends up taking a pawn. So Svidler blunders a little queen maneuver, but now bishop a4 attacks the rook. The rook gets blocked, but white has bishop c6. It's a tactical endgame. This knight's terrible positioning and this king's bad positioning leads to a fork of queen g6 and this. And the worst part is, that where are you going to even move the knight? If you play here, I have rook b6. I fork your queen and your knight. Your knight is that bad. Not only does it have no moves, it can't even be saved. So g5, queen d6, the knight is still trapped. And finally, it gets picked up, and we have queen rook 4 versus queen rook 3. Probably holdable, but let's see. Rook a7. And in this position, it's minus 15 for black. Sorry? Apparently, in this position, the move queen to f2 wins the game. You know why? Unstoppable threat of rook takes h3, pawn cannot take, king h3, and queen h4 mate. Look how unstoppable it is. If you play like queen d4, for example, that takes the eye off the g3 pawn, square, check, here, and that's it. And yeah, you win the rook at the end of it. Rook to f2. Queen to f2. And then you Damian Lillard them, you know, the buzzer beater versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. It would have been unbelievable. Queen f5. That was against the Thunder, right? And Westbrook. Queen d4. And we get a rook in game. a6, rook b7. So you have to take on c3. This is the whole point. Now, how do you play this position? It's rook and 3, rook and 3. First of all, folks, sideways defense, probably slightly better here, rather than having a rook on a8, because if it was on a8, you wouldn't really be able to move it, unless it was a check, and the king could just hide. So here comes the king. Here comes the king. You see that? Oh, wait, why did he give the pawn? Why didn't he just go like here? Well, Liem actually did something incredibly smart. He pushed his pawns. The problem is he didn't push his pawn again. Apparently, if he had played the move g4, hg4, and then king f6, it's a draw. For example, if king to c2, black would play g6. Now there's no more liabilities of pawns, and you would play king g5. That's the way you would draw this. You would go here, here, and king to g5. That is ridiculous. So you're never checked. Notice that instant replay. Sack a pawn, move the other pawn up a square. Yeah, I mean, that's too difficult. That is just ridiculous, and that doesn't happen. And so Svidler walks the king over and then walks it up. He just walks the king over and then walks the king up the board. Gets the king to the pawn, and now the game is lost. It's lost because the king just makes the journey. Rook a1, king b8. Rook b7, a8. Liem resigns. Very impressive, considering, like, here we did not think that that was going to happen. Now you know how to win these endgames with lateral defense. Bring the king over, kick the rook out, keep it moving. All right, third game of the day. Lenier Dominguez Perez. I didn't cover a game of his on day 1, and I said I would on day 2. e4. Petrov defense. d6, main line. Now, like, literally, this is the main line with d4, d5. And total symmetry until here. c6. Well, I guess not really symmetry because this knight's on e4, but whatever. You and I have different definitions of the word symmetry. Queen b3. So now if d takes c4, you can take the knight. Of course, that does hang a queen, but some of us have made career memes out of that. Bishop c4, b5. And now the bishop comes back, and now the knight comes back. So how does, like, what's next for white? I would imagine knight c3, bishop g5, rook e1. Okay. a3 to prevent knight to b4. Okay. Bishop c2. And once again, Lenier Dominguez Perez proves one thing. He proves that men only want one thing, and that is to mate. He also doesn't want his pawns doubled in front of his king. Rook e8, and now knight to e5. That's a very nice square for the knight. Of course, if you take it, one simple trade leads you to a very terrible position because queen g3 is coming. These bishops are super sexy. I should not be saying that about bishops. Queen c7, queen g3, and c5. Mamedyarov is trying to dislodge the support of the knight in the center of the board, and he's actually doing a very good job because there's nothing you can do with this pawn. If you take, the knight takes or the queen takes. Of course, there's also this, and that's mate. So, very bad. So, bishop g5, cd4, bishop f6. Watch this. Bishop g5, cd4 removes the defender of not just the knight, but also the bishop. Isn't that crazy? Queen c2, and now it's like a Wild Wild West cowboy shooting scene. The evaluation is 0-0-0, but you have to land every bullet. Queen takes g4, and here, one of the most disgusting moves I have ever seen. Shakhriyar Mamedyarov needs to be sent to the showers. Okay, after that, like, go wash off. You are dirty, and use extra soap. Queen to g6. He stops mate. And this is where you yell, oh no, my queen. Oh, queen g6. So he takes the queen with the queen, and then he takes like this. King g7, knight comes back. Now, I think the best move after queen g6 was something like knight d2, just making sure that your rook is protected so you can actually move some of your pieces. But once a move like queen g6 happens, you're going to blunder. The shock value of that move rattles through your soul. And immediately as the position kind of transforms, black is just better. Black is better because of piece activity. Now he plays bishop f4. He's trying to hit him with the old sneakaroo over here. But we have knight d3. And rook c8, another back-rank tactical idea. He yells, yo, no, my bishop. It's just a game of Mamedyarov impersonating Eric Rosen, his idol. So rook c8, king f1. But why is Dominguez just playing without 8 points of material? I mean, God gave him all those pieces on the back, or I guess the rules of chess gave him all the, but it depends if you were religious or not. Why are you not using them? Now knight c5, and how are you ever getting out? Look at this move. He gets in the way of the back rank threat again. But look at this. Check here, rook b1. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the saddest rook of all time. Knight back to d3 prevents this, but Mamedyarov plays a5. And if you play a4, I go b4. And if you don't play a4, I go a4. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the worst rook of all time. Of all time. Of all time. So bad that I'm going to tweet about it after I record this recap. God. Just look at it. It's so gross. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and so Mamedyarov won. Because I don't want to look at this anymore. I'm going to get demonetized for like violence and gore. Yeah, I mean, only Mamedyarov can do this. Queen sacrifice, 2 back rank rook ideas in the same game. I mean, just a nasty game. And by the way, all from one of the most boring openings of all time, which is the Petrov defense. Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, welcome to the big leagues. Well, he's been, I don't know why I keep saying welcome. Anyway, Wesley So versus Fabiano Caruana. This one I'm actually going to speed run. Well, slowly. Not a very exciting game. I mean, e4, e5, not a very exciting opening, I should say. And then here, Fabiano has a glitch in the matrix and just undevelops his knight. And then, you know, Wesley uncastles his rook. No, I'm just kidding. Bishop b3. The whole point of bringing the knight back is to fight the incoming pawn attack with a pawn structure of your own. It's an interesting idea. It's very passive, but slightly massive. Knight d2. a5. So there you go. Now we have b5 to take some space on the queen side. Knight d7, d4, and Fabiano starts to chop. He chops, and he puts his knight on b6. Okay, super. Now he has a passed pawn, by the way. But Wesley has more space in the center. He's got very nice bishops, sexy bishops, one would say. a4 and h3. And white just has a lot of good stuff here. A lot of good stuff. Fabiano plays d5, which is a very logical move. Wesley lodges the pawns in the center and kicks the knight out of the middle of the board. Now, he would love to occupy f4 so he could play g4 and trap the knight. That's just impossible. It's just not possible. So he plays g3. He does the next best thing. He controls the f4 square with the pawn. But now bishop takes a3, rook is attacked, rook is defended. Knight h4. And the idea of knight h4 is that you want to go knight f5. The idea of g6 is that you see that knight h4 wants to go knight f5, so you prevent it. And here Wesley So played knight f5 anyway, clearly anticipating that after bishop takes f5, bishop takes f5, g takes f5, he would take the knight. He is completely correct. That is 100% accurate. That variation is 100% correct. But chess is not about that. You got to prove yourself wrong in chess. Just because you prove yourself right 9 times out of 10, but 1 time fails, you shouldn't play the move. What if black just does this? You can't take this because the bishop is hanging. And Wesley resigned. And that takes me to my final game of the day, once again featuring none other than Sam Shankland, and I'm actually going to look at this from his perspective, because Sam is a gangster, okay? And he's playing Mamedyarov, who's also a gangster. Make no mistake. I mean, these two dudes show up to play chess, as opposed to, like, another game. So, we have d4, knight f6, and here, Sam Shankland plays the Semislav. And this is pretty cool, because I'm pretty sure Shankland has a course for, like, advanced and master level players on the Semislav defense. So it's cool that he's not just making it and not playing it, he's actually playing it, right? So e3, this is known as the Miran. Queen c2, it's like white plays e3 to defend c4 and then queen c2 to like control the e4 square. And it's sort of a very slow developing thing, waiting on this bishop. Maybe he'll play b3, bishop b2, and actually exactly that happens. So this is the position that we're getting. And now it's all about what happens with these pawns, right? Because we're 10 moves into a game. Actually, it's even different than that. Rook d1, rook d8. We're in a situation here where I think the main line here goes rook e1, rook e8. Like I've played this with white myself, but basically it's all about how the pawns open up in the middle. Will white play e4 or not? Will black take on c4 or e4? Will black play e5 or c5? That's it. Now, the fastest way to win here with white is to open up the center, transfer the queen over here, and go for checkmate, okay? The fastest way to win this position with black is to anticipate the opening of the position, line up the shooters over here on b7, g2, and b8, h2, and win the game like that. So it could get very violent very quickly. It could also just be a maneuvering game. e4. So takes, 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 takes. I've had these positions before, but normally with the rook here. And Shankland here plays f5. That is just a very, very clear anti-white's plan move. Queen e3. And now Sam opens up the position with c5. And now we see the thing. This is the difference in the quality of these bishops. 2 of these bishops are sexy, whereas these bishops, not so much. Not so much. Rook e1, c takes d4, all part of the plan, knight d4, and now we see the problem of fighting a guy who has pawns in the center with no pawns in the center, okay? Sometimes pawns in the center can be very weak, but not if the pawns are mobile. Mobility is everything. e5. Now what? If you play the move knight b5, which is exactly what happened in the game, black can drop back to b8 or play bishop c5. I told you, if these bishops come alive, it's a problem. It's a problem. Now what do you do with your queen? He goes to g3. You could go to h3 as well. Queen g3. But you know what Sam's next move is? The position plays itself. The position plays itself. f4. Now you got to move the queen again. Queen h3. Now that queen's a target, right? You have rook f6, rook h6. Sam does something similar. He plays knight f6, which... How does the move knight f6 target the queen? Can anybody tell me? You can't tell me, because there's no live chat, but you could tell me in the comments. How does that target the queen? You can pause here if you want. It's a nice little moment. Bishop c8. Gotta have good board vision. Gotta be good with your forward and backward movement. Gotta have full range of motion. Knight c3. And now Sam says, I know I have bishop c8, but you know what I have? You know what's worth more than a queen? All of GothamChess' subscribers. But you know what's worth more than a queen on a chessboard? Hello. Hi, Shakhriyar. Did you forget that no one's protecting your king? King takes f2. He didn't actually do any of that. And now bishop c8. And you know what the difference is between the two? Good luck finding a square for the queen. Because you'd like to go queen f3, right? You'd love to play this move. But now I have check. If you play king f1, I take this and I fork your king and queen. If you play this, it's even worse. It's even worse. It's even worse. Did I mention that it's even worse? Because it's even worse. And he couldn't have done that if he did it in the reverse move order. You see, if he had played this, he can't do that because the queen takes. Move order is everything in chess. So bishop f2, here, bishop c8, shock takes, rook takes. I don't even want the queen yet. Where are you going to move it? g4. And now, folks, a very tragic moment. This will go down in history as the day that the revolution against en passant began. You see, in chess, not everybody is privy to the fact that en passant is forced. F takes g3 here is forced. The problem with this is that even though it's check, the queen now would get out of danger and white would retain a material advantage. This is a tragic moment where the only move here that wins the game is rook to d2, attacking the bishop, threatening this with the pin, and winning the game for black. But it's not en passant. And so after rook to d1, Shankland detonated the bomb. Bishop takes g4. Danger levels, hitting the queen, disregarding the target on the rook, and Mamedyarov resigned after 25 moves in a violent fashion. Sam Shankland goes from half out of 3 on day 1 to 2.5 out of 3. He drew his third round game against Hikaru. That was sort of a non-game. Very solid game, very quick draw, but very nice wins. 2 nice wins for Shankland on the second day of the Rapid, but a depressing day for all as en passant was not played when it was available. And these, folks, are our standings after the second day of action in the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz. Right here. Caruana still maintaining an advantage over the field because despite losing to Shankland, he put the beats and the clamps on Lenier, Dominguez, Perez, and Wesley So in that tragic move, knight f5. Jeffery, Xiong struggling, but it's not such a struggle. He's only a point away. It's close between 4 and 6. The thing is that you just have to score some points somewhere. I will see you all back for the third day of the Rapid and Blitz. It's currently 7 in the morning. You might ask, why am I up making videos at 7 in the morning? Well, Sam Reina invited me to play on Comedians on Board, which is an event that he puts on in India. Many live viewers, but unfortunately, the 9.5 hour time difference made me wake up at 6 a.m. to play an exhibition game there. So I decided to film a recap at 7 a.m. I work hard. I hope you enjoy, and I will see you soon. Get out of here.